you a perfectionist? Have you got incredibly high standards that you put on yourself, only to often feel disappointed that you haven't quite reached them and beat yourself up afterwards? Do you put loads of energy into hiding any mistake that you may have made and avoid doing something where you may risk failing? Does your self-worth completely hinge on your achievement? And does your desire to be perfect actually cause you a great deal of anxiety? Maybe you're a manager or a leader, and maybe this perfectionism trait is actually affecting how you manage your team. Because if you're putting perfectionism expectations on yourself, there's a likelihood you're going to be putting expectations of perfection on them. If you're putting perfection expectations on your team are going to feel pressured. They're going to feel never good enough. You're going to feel irritated by the work that they deliver, and it's going to cause tension and feuds and conflict between you. In the long run, you're simply going to have a very demotivated team, and that is never good. So if you are resonating with this, here are 3 ways to overcoming perfectionism. Number 1, acknowledge that you actually have it. Now, too many people actually use it as a badge of honor, like it's something to be proud of because they seem to think that they're going to achieve amazing standards by labeling themselves that they're a perfectionist. Now, that's one of the problems. Most people see it as part of their identity, like a label, I am perfectionist, as opposed to having perfectionist traits. Once you start seeing it as something that you do, as opposed to something that you are, it removes it from being a foundation of your entire identity. People can't change something that they are, but they can change something that they do. So putting yourself back in the driving seat behind what this thing is and having control over changing it is the first thing. As long as you believe that you haven't got control to change it, you've got nowhere to build upon that. Number 2, recognize the stories and the myths that you tell yourself when you're in perfectionism mode. For example, if this thing isn't perfect, X or blank will happen. What's that blank? What's the X? What's the thing that you actually believe will happen if it isn't perfect? If I nail this, blank will happen. What's the blank? What's the story you're telling yourself there? If this thing isn't perfect, it means I am blank. What's that blank there? You see, the thing is, not many people realize that perfectionism is actually a symptom of a deeper thing. But people think perfectionism is actually the problem. It's not. It's just how it's showing up for the deeper problem. Brene Brown often talks about it as that we've got this hidden shame and we're trying to prove to other people that we are good enough in a way that we don't feel it about ourselves. So what are the stories that are connected to not being good enough? And that will be the things that are driving this perfectionism streak in you. Those stories and beliefs become so habitual, they create neural pathways in your brain. And when that neural pathway is triggered, it becomes normal. You get a particular level of hormones that float around your body. And as a result, it starts feeling this is just what I do. It starts becoming habitual. But when you start recognizing those patterns, you can start creating new neural pathways. And you do that by recognizing the old stories, challenging those old stories, and then reframing them into something more healthy. Because you can choose if you hang on to those old beliefs and stories, or if you choose new ones. Number 3, work out what is enough before you actually start on a particular task. Too many people go into a task not actually aware of what is going to be enough and what isn't going to be enough. Now, more than often when I'm coaching somebody, they'll say to me, for example, I can't submit this piece of work until it's of a particular standard. My next question is often, what is that particular standard? And more than often, my client will reply with, well, I don't know. So if you don't actually know what perfection really looks like, how can you tell when you get there? You're just waiting for some funny feeling that sinks into your stomach. The reality is perfection is only a myth. There's no such thing as perfection. So if we're driving towards perfection, you're driving towards an invisible level anyway. So set in clear boundaries in your own head, what is enough before you actually get going. For example, how long are you going to work on it? Set a deadline until what time you're willing to work until, and then cut off and say no more. How much research are you going to do beforehand? How many pages is it going to be? How many times are you willing to actually proofread it before you say this is acceptable? Think about it. Every time you're constantly saying yourself, I must do more to make this perfect, you're effectively saying that what you have done isn't good enough. So every time you're saying, I must do more, I must make it better, you're basically saying what I've done isn't adequate. And therefore this is substandard, which reinforces the belief that you're not good enough. So being clear in advance around what it is that you're going to do and what you're going to aim for before you get going will actually short circuit that drive to do more, do more, do more. and in turn, start short-circuiting the belief that I'm not good enough. If you have any further questions on your perfectionism traits, then don't hesitate to drop me a line at info@andrewmcquillan.com. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the hell out of that like button, subscribe to my channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell to make sure that you pick up all future content. And other than that, have a good day. Cheers.